I want you to close your eyes and imagine the absolute safety of your childhood home, the familiar creaks of the floorboards, the scent of your mother's cooking, the comforting shape of the shadows in your own bedroom. Tonight, I'll whisper a story that might follow you into your dreams. The story of a boy who discovered that the safety of his home was an illusion and that he had been sharing his room with a monster.
Dark tales whispered at night.
The story begins in 1981, told by a man who was then just a 9-year-old boy. Like many kids, he had a habit of sneaking downstairs for a midnight snack. His family's old house had a geography he knew by heart. He could navigate the creaks in the stairs, the angle of the moonlight through the living room window, the exact spot on the counter where the best leftovers were kept. But one night in May, the geography of his home changed forever. He crept down the stairs, his target a container of sweet and sour pork from the fish and shrimp house. The house was completely dark, save for the faint green glow of the microwave clock. As he rounded the corner into the kitchen, he froze. A fork clicked softly on the counter. Someone was already there. The microwave's light cast a weak outline around a figure sitting at their kitchen counter in his father's usual spot. A skinny man, his back to the boy, drinking milk directly from the carton and eating their leftovers with their forks. The boy couldn't explain the sheer paralyzing terror of seeing a stranger in his house. It was a violation of the universe's most basic law. Home was supposed to be safe. He didn't breathe. He didn't move. He simply watched. The man finished his meal, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and seemed to dissolve back into the shadows. The boy backed away slowly, every step a lifetime, and ran upstairs to wake his parents. But by the time they came down, armed with a fireplace poker and a healthy dose of parental skepticism, the kitchen was empty. The milk carton was back in the fridge. The fork was in the sink. There was no one there. His parents told him it was just a bad dream, but the boy knew what he saw, and he knew the man was still in the house. The weeks that followed were a quiet, simmering nightmare for the boy. He started noticing things no one else did. Food that would go missing, not just leftovers, but small things. A handful of crackers from a new box, a single apple from the fruit bowl. He would hear faint rustling sounds from within the walls, sounds his parents dismissed as rats or the house settling. He felt watched, a constant prickling sensation on the back of his neck. His bedroom door didn't have a lock, so he began sleeping with a steak knife under his pillow, a 9-year-old soldier in a war no one else believed was happening. Then, one hot night in August, the true horror revealed itself. The boy was in his room, reading under the dim light of his bedside lamp. He looked up, his eyes drawn to the air conditioning vent on the wall directly over his bed. It was a simple metal grate, something he'd seen 1,000,000 times. But tonight, it was different. In the deep darkness behind the grate, something reflected the light. A pair of eyes. They were just watching him, calmly, patiently. He didn't scream. The fear was too deep for that. He simply stared back, locked in a silent contest with the eyes in his wall. He finally broke the spell, scrambling out of his bed and raising hell. He screamed and cried until his parents, weary but concerned, searched the entire house. They checked the attic. They checked the crawl space under the house. They found nothing. For a few weeks, the boy was deeply unpopular, the child who cried wolf. But he knew the eyes were real. He started taping the vent shut every night, a flimsy barrier against the man who lived in the spaces between. By the end of August, a new element was added to the boy's terror: a smell. A sweet, rotten odor began to permeate the house, strongest in his bedroom. It was a smell of decay, of something gone horribly wrong. His parents complained, blaming a dead rat, but the boy knew better. The smell was coming from his vent. One night, the smell was overwhelming. The boy lay in bed, unable to sleep, staring at the taped-up grate. And then, something fell from it. A single grain of rice, dry and pale, landed on his blanket. Then another. He looked closer. They weren't just rice. They were maggots.
That was the final straw. The next day, his parents called the AC repair company. A man came, unscrewed the vent over the boy's bed, and peered inside with a flashlight. He was silent for a long time. Then he simply said, "You need to call the police." It turns out something had crawled into the vents and died. It was the man. The skinny man from the kitchen. The police later explained that their old house, with its large ducts and cavernous spaces between the walls, had been his home since at least May. He had a small foam pad he would place by the vent over the boy's bed so he could be comfortable while he watched him read, while he watched him sleep. The police mentioned he had made drawings, but when the boy asked what they were, they quickly changed the subject. They never identified him. He was buried as a John Doe, a nameless phantom who had haunted a family from the inside out. For the boy, the world was never the same. The fundamental safety of home had been shattered, replaced by the horrifying knowledge that the walls have eyes, that the vents can breathe.
To this day, now a grown man and a writer of horror, he cannot look directly into the air vents in houses. The trauma never truly gets old. And sometimes, when he's at a friend's house on a quiet night, he'll catch a faint, unfamiliar smell from the central air conditioning, and a cold dread will wash over him. And he'll wonder, who's living back there, in the darkness of their ducts, just watching and waiting? If you've ever felt like you weren't truly alone in your own home, share your story below. And remember, sometimes the monster isn't under your bed, it's inside your walls. If these whispers reached you tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more. Until the next chill, good night. Sweet dreams where the whispers wait.